We've all done it right. Scrolled through our feeds, seen some completely ridiculous video of a mishap, and maybe, had a quick laugh. A car trying to park, failing spectacularly, or maybe a DIY project just going completely sideways. It's almost like a gut reaction. But how often do we really stop and think, okay, hold on, what actually happened there? What were the risks? The physics involved, the human element? Meh. Because sometimes that little chuckle, it can actually hide some really, really serious underlying dangers. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're doing exactly that. We're digging into something that maybe on the surface seems a bit niche, but it actually touches on huge aspects of workplace safety, human error, even things like organizational psychology. We're talking about forklift fails. Yeah, those incidents that might look funny at first glance, but when you really unpack them, they teach us some profoundly serious and frankly universally applicable lessons, especially for anyone working in, complex operational settings. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're taking a list, basically, a collection of observations about these seemingly humorous forklift accidents. Our source is an article called 13 Funny Forklift Fails That Get Serious. And we're going to try and pull out not just what happened, but the why. Uncover those critical safety rules, the technical stuff, the human factors that got missed, and really understand why those slips matter so much. We'll try to balance that sort of initial wow factor of these incidents with a really thorough deep look at the principles at stake. So hopefully you walk away not just entertained, but genuinely well-informed.
I have to admit, you see some of these forklift accidents, and yeah, that initial reaction is kind of like, oh dear, well, at least nobody got seriously hurt this time. It's almost a defense mechanism, isn't it? To sort of distance yourself.
It absolutely is. And,
Yeah.
That's exactly why looking closer is so important. A quick laugh is one thing, but the reality is forklift hazards in the workplace are a massive concern.
Right.
Getting hurt on or by a forklift is it's no laughing matter at all. If you look at the UK stats from the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, nearly 1,300 people end up hospitalized every single year from forklift accidents. And what's really quite sobering, and maybe points to bigger issues, is that these numbers, they're not going down. It highlights this persistent, really critical problem that goes way beyond just one person making a mistake. It points to gaps in training, maybe culture, oversight.
Wow, 1,300 hospitalizations a year.
Yeah.
That definitely reframes those viral clips, doesn't it? Suddenly, they're not just mishaps, they're like urgent case studies in risk management. Okay, so as we talk through this, we'll look at specific examples from the article, but we'll keep bringing it back always to those crucial safety lessons and, what it means for workplace safety and just running things properly.
Exactly. And before we even jump into the specific accidents, I think it's vital to just lay out the basic reasons why these things happen. They aren't just random events, right? They usually stem from a mix of identifiable issues, and often things that could have been prevented, like operator stress. The HSE's figures for 2023 also showed over 914,000 workers suffering from work-related stress. Now, imagine that pressure when you're operating heavy machinery. Your judgment, your reaction time, it can be significantly impaired. It's incredibly dangerous. And then beyond stress, you've got the usual suspects. Improper training. And that's not just the initial certificate. It's ongoing specialized practical training. Poorly maintained forklifts are a big one. Mechanical failures, worn brakes, hydraulic problems. They suddenly introduce huge risks. Bad accessories, driving too fast, just using improper technique generally. These things often pile up. They interact. It's rarely just one single thing. It's more like a chain reaction waiting to happen.
Right, so it's seldom just one isolated failure point. It's more this complex dance between the person, the machine, and the environment they're in. Okay, so while that list isn't everything, it gives us a really solid framework, doesn't it, for understanding these fails and what's behind them. And I bet we're going to see pretty much all of those elements pop up in the examples we're about to discuss. Okay, let's dive into some really clear violations of just basic safety rules. Starting with one the source calls much too much. Picture this. An operator trying to move fragile stuff, it's balanced really awkwardly, clearly overloaded, and this is key, not secure at all. It just looks like, a physics lesson waiting to happen. What jumps out at you there, both immediately and maybe on a deeper level?
Well, the immediate thing with much too much is just the total disregard for basic safety rules, especially around handling loads and stability. Technically speaking, every forklift operates based on something called the stability triangle. Any load affects that center of gravity. So when you've got stuff carried at a weird angle, overloaded, not tied down, you're basically asking for that center of gravity to shift outside the stable zone. And then it tips. The article mentions glass shattering everywhere. Luckily, no one got hurt physically. But that kind of carelessness, the potential consequences are huge. Big property damage, sure, but also serious injury, even death. It screams not just the lack of training in how loads behave, but maybe also a workplace culture that either pushes people to cut corners or just doesn't enforce the rules properly. It's that idea of normalization of deviance, where unsafe stuff becomes normal because, well, nothing bad's happened yet.
Yeah, that normalization of deviance idea is really striking. Makes you wonder how many operators feel that pressure, maybe implicitly, to just push things a bit too far. Okay, moving on. Next example. It pays to slow down. Here we see a driver described as reckless, not paying attention, just going way too fast. And surprise, surprise, everything comes tumbling down in a huge mess. This isn't just about speed, though, is it? It's about control.
Absolutely. Driving too fast isn't just some arbitrary rule on a forklift. It's grounded in the physics of the machine itself. Forklifts, they have a high center of gravity. They're built to lift heavy things, not corner like sports cars. So quick acceleration, sharp turns, slamming on the brakes, any of that can make the load unstable or even tip the whole truck over. The way the load shifts dynamically, especially when braking, can turn something stable into something unstable in an instant. And this kind of behavior, ignoring surroundings, going too fast, it doesn't just wreck stuff. It puts everyone else around, other workers, anyone just walking by, in immediate serious danger. It's a fundamental violation of operating technique and, honestly, could lead to serious disciplinary action, way beyond just paying for the damage. The why behind it often comes down to this idea of efficiency over safety, right? Trying to get the job done faster, maybe because of unrealistic deadlines or just bad workflow, without really getting the massive risk involved.
It's those little everyday pressures, isn't it, that can lead to taking those really dangerous shortcuts. And sometimes the mistake is way simpler, just not seeing what's right there. We've got a couple examples that really hit this home. Look First and Moving Out of Town. In Look First, a driver seems okay at first, then just backs straight into a water trough. And in Moving Out of Town, another operator reverses pretty fast right into shelves full of stock. These seem so avoidable, yet they happen.
Yeah, putting those two together really hammers home how vital situational awareness is, especially when reversing. Forklifts, just by how they're built, often have massive blind spots, particularly at the back. So you have to check systematically. Use your mirrors, yes, but also physically turn around, look where you're going. Maybe even use a spotter if it's a busy area. The Look First one, backing into a trough, that often happens from relying too much on mirrors, maybe, or just a split second of lost focus. But moving out of town, hitting shelving at speed while reversing, that shows a more profound lack of spatial awareness, maybe even respect for the environment you in. It's not just a simple operator mistake. It points to a breakdown in following basic procedures, checking your path before you move. It underscores why constant, careful scanning of the work area is so necessary, and the potential fallout from even seemingly small bumps like that, wrecking expensive inventory, damaging the racking structure itself, which could lead to a bigger collapse. It just shows why you need that constant vigilance.
Right, vigilance. Even for the tasks that seem routine, it's just non-negotiable. Now, it feels like a lot of these aren't just about being careless or a quick lapse in concentration. Sometimes it seems to come from a really fundamental misunderstanding or maybe even ignoring what a forklift is for. It's a precision tool, right, for a specific job. It's not, I don't know, a go-kart.
That's a really sharp observation, and it leads us perfectly into the next set of examples that show exactly that. The psychology behind it can be, well, sometimes it's overconfidence, maybe a misplaced feeling of being invincible, especially when operators get too comfortable, or worse, decide to treat the machine like, well, like a toy.
A pretty stark example is 2 words, seatbelt. The article describes a driver actually being thrown out of the forklift. A pretty grim picture. It's such a basic safety feature, so why would anyone skip it?
Well, this incident is just a brutal reminder of why restraints are there and why they're mandatory. A forklift, especially when you stand up in, it has what's called a ROPS, a rollover protective structure. The whole point of the seatbelt, or any restraint, is to keep you inside that protective cage if the machine tips over. Getting thrown out, like that driver, that puts you directly in the path of several tons of falling metal. You risk being crushed, or as the source rather graphically puts it, pancaked on the concrete. Why skip it? Often it's seen as inconvenient, especially if you're hopping on and off a lot. Or it's that classic, it won't happen to me thinking, that cognitive bias. But the moment it does happen, that bias is just catastrophically wrong. It really highlights the need for a safety culture that doesn't just mandate seatbelts, but constantly reinforces why they're essential. Maybe even looking at better designs to make them less hassle for frequent dismounts.
Yeah, that difference between being inside or outside the ROPS, that's absolutely critical. And then you get this cluster of incidents that basically just shout, forklifts are not playthings, ah, Kong. The source mentions don't try this, bad idea X10, and nice moves. These aren't accidents in the usual sense, they're just utter foolishness. People climbing on forklifts for no reason, clinging to the back like it's some kind of fairground ride. One even describes a near-death situation when an overloaded forklift just crashes down. These feel less like errors and more like deliberate, reckless acts.
This group of examples, it shows a complete breakdown in judgment and, frankly, professionalism. When we talk about needing proper certification to operate a forklift, it's not just about ticking a box or passing a quick test. It's about instilling a really deep respect for the machine's power and its inherent dangers. Treating heavy equipment like a toy shows zero understanding of load limits, stability, the immense crushing forces involved. The consequences here are just horrific. Decapitation, losing limbs, destroying thousands, maybe millions in inventory, as the source points out. What's going on psychologically? Often it's bravado, maybe peer pressure, or just a staggering, almost unbelievable underestimation of the risk. A certified operator should never, ever let untrained people ride on a forklift, especially with no safety gear. It's not just breaking a rule, it's a fundamental failure to protect life and limb. And the legal and ethical fallout from that kind of misuse is enormous.
That is a very powerful reminder, isn't it, of the serious responsibility that comes with handling these machines. Okay, so moving beyond individual mistakes or just deliberate messing around, sometimes accidents are more complex. They involve the equipment, the surroundings, maybe wider decisions people made. Let's look at some of those more systemic and environmental factors.
Absolutely. This is where we start to see how multiple things can line up to create a dangerous situation. And it often reveals deeper issues within the organization or maybe even the design of the workplace itself, going beyond just what one operator did or didn't do.
Okay, take forklifts on forklifts. The article calls it daft, one forklift trying to pick up another forklift. The source notes how ridiculous it looks, especially because the bigger forklift apparently had room to just extend its mast higher, which would have been the safe way. This feels like someone improvising, but what's the real risk here?
Well, this is a classic case of improper technique, probably born out of poor judgment, maybe a lack of planning. And as you said, apparently a safer option was right there. Technically, lifting another forklift. That completely changes the center of gravity in ways the machine just isn't designed for. It's way beyond its normal load capacity calculations. Every forklift has a load chart, right? It tells you exactly how much you can lift, at what height, and how far out the load center can be. Trying a lift like this without even thinking about that, you're just asking for a catastrophic failure. The article says only property got damaged this time, but it really shows a dangerous habit of making do instead of following proper engineered procedures. And it makes you ask, why did they even try this? Was the right equipment missing? Were they under time pressure? Was there just no planning? It's a lot, potentially, about a safety culture that might tolerate these kinds of risky shortcuts.
Yeah, it points to those wider issues, doesn't it? That might push someone towards thinking that improvisation is okay. Next up, burning desire. We have a foundry worker who got, as the source says, a little too casual, throws a bale of aluminum into a furnace, causes a mini explosion, and the cab lights up like a Christmas tree. This is obviously a very specialized, high-risk place to work.
It really is. And that incident with a foundry worker, it just underlines the absolute need for specialized training when you're dealing with hazardous environments or materials. Working near molten metal, high-temperature furnaces, it demands intense awareness. You need to understand how materials react, the potential for sudden exothermic events, rapid expansion. A casual approach, there's just no room for it. Now, the article mentions the worker was calm afterwards, which is maybe good nerve, but the fact it happened at all suggests a possible gap. Maybe a misunderstanding of aluminum's properties in that state, or perhaps just a lapse in procedure when adding material to the furnace. It raises critical questions about ongoing training, refreshers for operators in these really high-stakes jobs, making sure they are absolutely clear on every single variable. It's a stark reminder that even seemingly routine tasks in dangerous places need constant focus and sticking to very precise rules.
It's that difference, isn't it, between just knowing how to drive the machine and understanding the whole ecosystem you're operating inside. Speaking of messes, it's raining cans is another good one. Used beer cans, stacked way too high, crucially, not wrapped up, leading to, well, a predictable disaster when the operator tries to move them.
Oh, this is just a perfect illustration of why pallets get wrapped and why securing your load properly is so fundamental. Forklift training isn't just steering and lifting. It covers crucial things like load integrity, how to stack things correctly, understanding the physics of what you're moving. Unwrapped cans, stacked that high, it's an incredibly unstable column. Any little sideways movement, the slightest bump from the forks, it's going to cascade. It ties directly back to improper technique and really highlights how those seemingly small details like proper wrapping, how the load is configured are absolutely critical for both safety and just getting the job done without waste. Could easily have hurt someone standing nearby. It reminds us that safety isn't just the forklift. It's how it interacts with its cargo and its surroundings.
And sometimes a very small interaction can lead to a huge consequence, like in Who Would Hate to Be That Guy?
Yeah.
A forklift apparently barely touches the shelf, and the whole warehouse racking system just collapses like dominoes. That's the nightmare scenario.
That really is the perfect storm, isn't it? It shows that interplay of multiple potential failures. Okay, maybe the forklift impact was minor, but driving into racking at all is always a critical error. Always. But the bigger issue there, the one that makes it catastrophic, is likely the structural integrity, or lack thereof, of the shelving units themselves. Warehouses are supposed to be designed with specific rack load capacities, standards for impact resistance. For a whole system to go down like dominoes suggests maybe a failure in inspection, in maintenance, maybe even improper installation in the first place. So this isn't just about the operator being careless. It raises really serious questions about the overall facility management. Are they doing regular safety audits? Was that racking system already damaged or compromised? And the forklift bump was just the last straw. It's a brutal reminder that safety is shared. It goes from the operator all the way up to the people responsible for the building's infrastructure.
That's a genuinely terrifying image, and it really highlights the need for multiple layers of safety checks. Okay, finally, taking off. Here, an operator gets a nasty shock when the truck they're unloading from starts to move. His forklift tilts, and then he makes what the source calls the cardinal sin, trying to jump out of the falling forklift.
Right, this one points squarely at a breakdown in communication and coordination. That's absolutely vital in any loading or unloading situation. Knowing where the driver is, making sure there's positive communication, maybe using wheel chocks, trailer locks, clear hand signal, something to prevent that truck from moving unexpectedly. That's fundamental. But the operator's reaction, trying to jump, that's a critical lesson in panic response versus what you're trained to do. Like we talked about with the seatbelt, the safest place when a forklift tips is almost always inside the operator compartment strapped in. That ROPS cage is designed to protect you there. Trying to jump out puts you right in the path of the falling machine, turning a potentially survivable forklift failure into a likely fatality. It really underscores why training needs to cover not just the technical skills, but also emergency procedures and drilling in that counterintuitive discipline to stay put during a tip over.
Wow. We've definitely gone from those initial sort of funny but not funny moments to some really quite sobering and I think deeply insightful points. So for our listener who's hopefully now very well informed, what's the big fundamental takeaway from this whole deep dive into forklift fails?
The bottom line really is that forklifts are incredibly powerful machines, and they are inherently dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
They are heavy equipment designed for very specific industrial jobs. They are absolutely not to be taken lightly. Those nearly 1,300 hospitalizations every year in the UK, they aren't just numbers on a page. They're a grim tally of the cumulative impact of all these preventable errors we've talked about. Errors that might start with an individual slip-up, yes, but are often made worse by poor training, maybe systemic pressures in the workplace, flawed safety cultures, equipment that hasn't been maintained properly. The real deep insight, I think, is that understanding forklift safety isn't just about memorizing rules. It's about truly appreciating the complex mix of human psychology, how organizations work, and the hard physics that govern safe operation.
Yeah, this deep dive really has taken us on quite a journey. From that fleeting moment of maybe dark amusement to a much deeper understanding of workplace safety, technical stuff, and just human behavior. What looked like just a funny fail at first glance really unraveled into this intricate web of critical lessons about training, equipment, environment, and those often hidden psychological drivers behind accidents.
Indeed. So maybe next time you see any kind of heavy machinery operating or even just hear about a mishap anywhere in any operational setting, try to think beyond just the surface event. Think about all those layers, the training, the procedures, the potential organizational pressures, the individual awareness that should have been there. And this raises, I think, an important question for you, our listener. Beyond the obvious mistake, what underlying factor, maybe systemic, maybe psychological, do you think gets overlooked most often when we try to prevent these kinds of incidents? Because this knowledge, it's not just for the operators themselves. It helps all of us to critically appreciate the risks we often don't see and the constant diligence that's needed in our increasingly complex world.
Absolutely. Being truly well-informed isn't just seeing the superficial funny bit, it's understanding those crucial, often hidden lessons that can actually prevent tragedy. We really hope this deep dive has given you a fresh and maybe more profound perspective on the seriousness that's often hidden just beneath the surface of everyday operations.